Hi, my name is Sean, and today I'm going to be talking about the art of delaying and deflecting. Very often, when someone asks us a question, we feel an obligation to answer. And in your personal life, this can be, awkward and uncomfortable. And in business, it can be even worse, though, because it can affect your confidence and also your negotiations. So it becomes really important to find some tips and some methods of getting over this and dealing with it. So today I'm going to talk about that. This is a lesson that evolved from about 3 different clients that I had. Let me tell you a little bit about them. The first one, his name was Sebastian. He was a press secretary for the mayor of Hamburg, Germany. And he was really smooth, like a admirable guy, really intelligent, and he could kind of weasel his way around any question. So I would throw questions at him because that was what we were working on, that he could answer quickly and without thinking. He would just want to be able to answer questions. And so I'd throw any kind of awkward question at him, like, if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? And without me missing a beat, he would go, I would be an elephant, and let me tell you why. And he could just BS his way through anything. And if you asked him a question that he didn't want to answer, an uncomfortable one, he could delay and deflect in a way that politicians often do. I'm sure you've noticed it in the news, where if they ask them a direct question, they will never answer the direct question. They will weasel their way around to the topic that they want to talk about. And while that is a weasel trait that we don't want to have, we don't want to be like that, but sometimes that talent can be a little bit useful in our business dealings. So we're going to talk about today how to get some of those. The other clients I had also, this is how this lesson kind of evolved, was working with them, kind of trying to get some traits from Sebastian over to the others. One of them, she was a negotiator for Deutsche Bank, and her negotiations was a really high position and a very important negotiation she had. And she would tell me about breaking down in the elevator crying after these negotiations, but she'd have to be really strong in the negotiation. She would bring an extra shirt with her to work because after the negotiation, her back would be completely drenched in sweat. It was really a lot of pressure. And she was working with an assertiveness trainer. And the assertiveness trainer was telling her, he would ask her questions, like direct questions, like, how many tattoos do you have? He'd look at her. And he was a big ex-military guy who was kind of intimidating. And he'd say, what kind of tattoos do you have? And ask her uncomfortable questions that she normally would not want to answer, but she would feel obligated to answer. And she'd be, I've got 2 on my ankle. And you'd be like, no, that's not the right answer. They would just train again and again to make her more assertive and not feel obligated to answer these questions. The other client I had was, she was negotiating also for Colgate. And she would have to present her marketing plans in front of a large group of men. This isn't a sexist thing, this is just what happened. She would have to present her marketing plans in front of this group of men who would mock her. Horrible situation. She'd be terrified going into these, and she knew she couldn't show any weakness because she wanted to get her plans through, and as soon as she showed any weakness, they'd be, we knew it, get out of here. So she would want to practice phrases to be assertive and answer questions about her marketing plan. The Deutsche Bank also, we would practice these phrases again and again to give you answers if you don't want to answer something directly, so that you don't feel obligated to answer. This is along the lines of a very good friend of mine who was an ex-fighter pilot. And he said that to train fighter pilots, what they would do is they would blindfold him in the plane, and he would have to memorize where every single gauge and button is, so that if they are under pressure, if they're under fire, they would immediately know where those buttons are. Because when you're feeling tense, when you're feeling emotional and awkward, well, you don't feel awkward if you're under fire, but in a situation where someone asks you a direct question, it can be awkward. But if you feel emotional at all or nervous, it's hard to come up with an answer. So you want to build an arsenal of phrases that you have at your fingertips. How many times have you been in a kind of a fight with someone or in a terrible situation, and you go home and think, God, I wish I had said this, I wish I had said that. If you can memorize some of these phrases and some of these reactions, some of these responses, excuse me, and you will have an arsenal to react when you're under pressure. And that's kind of my plan here today, what we're going to talk about. One of them, if I look down, I'm sorry, I know it's not professional, I'm looking at my notes, sorry. So one of them, first one, is asking for clarification. We're going to go through these one by one. Asking for clarification, asking for reassurance, giving yourself time to think, some phrases to give yourself some time to think, answer with a question, answer question with another question, and just plain out avoid answering. Okay, so we're going to go through these one by one. Asking for clarification. Okay, there's a good reason for asking for clarification, even if you know what they said, even if you don't need the clarification. Here's the thing. How many times when you're listening to someone are you not really listening? Instead, you're thinking about the next thing that you want to say. People can sniff that out. It's obvious. And you don't want to do that. So the first time you're listening to someone, you want to be authentic. You want to be in the moment. You want to be really listening to them. But that doesn't give you time to think, does it? So asking for clarification, first of all, you might need the clarification. And it's always good to get someone to rephrase it, reiterate it, something so that you get a clearer vision of what they really want to say. But another reason for asking for clarification is to give yourself time to think the second time around. So I'm looking down at my phrases, sorry. Would you mind rephrasing that question? I didn't quite understand. Even if you did understand, it's good. It's giving yourself time to think, okay? Could you repeat that? Another good one. Would you elaborate a little more on that? This will give you, elaborate is even kind of asking for a longer answer, so that will give you even more time to think. That's a good one. Have I understood you correctly? Could you repeat that again? These are all phrases for asking for clarification, which is a really good tool to give yourself time to think. The next one, giving reassurance. A lot of times people will kind of attack you, but instead of addressing what they are attacking you for, it's good to address their motive. Let me give you an example. You didn't meet the deadline last time, so why do we think you're going to meet the deadline now? Instead of, I'm sorry we didn't meet the deadline, it was because of this and this. Instead of making excuses, don't make the excuses, give reassurances. This person is really telling you that they don't feel safe. They don't feel sure that you can handle it. So address their real root. I'd like to reassure you about that. These are some phrases that you can memorize to give them reassurance. There is no need for concern on that point. I can understand your concern. It's really good to say, I understand. It make a person feel understood. Another tip for that is to rephrase what they've told you, which lets them know that you understood what they're trying to say. I understand your concern for this, but blah, 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 blah. There's really no need for worry on that front. Okay, these are all really good phrases to memorize to reassure someone. This is not exactly deflecting or delaying, but it's along those lines. It's a really good one to memorize. Next one. These are phrases just to give yourself some time to think. Okay. Don't be afraid of pauses too. If pauses too long can be really uncomfortable. I worked with this CEO of this company who would do some hiring himself for certain positions, and he would be in interviews with people, and he would tell me about the interviews, and he would ask them questions like, are you sure that you're telling me everything? Isn't there something else you wanted to tell me about this? Are you sure there's nothing I should know? And he would just kind of look at them and leave a really long, awkward pause. And he felt that this awkward pause, which I think is kind of manipulative and horrible, but he felt that this awkward pause was very useful in getting them, eliciting information that he wanted. So it is effective because people don't like awkward pauses. Okay, short pauses can be okay. So here are some phrases which you can follow with some short pauses to give yourself some time to think. That's a very interesting question. And then just leave that hanging a little bit. Give yourself some time to think and respond. I'm glad you asked that question. And it's okay to leave a little pause after that too. Give yourself some time to think. Instead of feeling obligated to answer right away, give yourself some time to think. Another thing, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I'm afraid I can't give you an answer right now. I'm afraid I can't answer that question at the moment. I know in my university class, I taught a university class for a very long time in business communications. And if a student asked me a question, I always felt because I'm the lecturer, I should know the answer. And I felt like I'm in a position where, I'm supposed to be respected and blah, blah, blah. So if they asked me a question, I always felt obligated to have an answer. When I realized if I tell them the wrong answer, that's going to be a lot worse than if I just say I don't know, or I need to get back to you with better information. So it's okay to say, I'm afraid I can't give you an answer at the moment, but I will get back to you after I've looked into it a little bit more. That's an answer that someone can respect. The next one is to answer with a question. We do this a lot in our personal lives. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? Okay. It feels a little bit more uncomfortable though to do this in business, but it's a good tool. Do you think you can meet that deadline? I don't know. Do you think that you're going to be able to give us any flexibility on that? Okay, so it's rather than feeling obligated to come up with an answer, you can turn it around and ask another question. Okay, the last one is to flat out avoid answering. And I don't want to be sexist about this, but in my experience, it has been women who are more afraid of saying no, that men tend to be a little bit more okay about that. And this is a weird example, but I saw this interview once with this serial killer. I don't remember who it was, like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or someone horrible like that. But it was interesting that it was the guy who was pretending to be injured, and then he would get into his truck and he would ask women to help him. And they would get into the van, and they of course would feel horribly bad feeling about getting into the van, but they would do it anyway, and then he would push them in there and close the door. It's horrible. Well, they asked him later, how did you get all of these women to help you, to go with you, to get into the van? And he said something along the lines of, well, it was easy because women are more afraid of saying no than they are for their own personal safety. And that really stuck with me. That's really, I know for a lot of women, and I'm sure men too, I don't mean to be sexist about that, but I know for a lot of women that I know, saying no is really difficult. And sometimes it's really hard to just avoid answering. So it's really good to memorize these phrases that we can use in situations where we just don't want to answer. One of them is, well, that would depend on several factors. And then just leave it hanging. You don't even have to say which factors. Just leave it at that. Perhaps I could answer that question later. Then leave it hanging. That's good. Better than saying no. And then on the last one, I'd prefer not to comment on that. And I think the tone is really important here. If you say, I prefer not to comment on that, that's going to be a lot different situation than whether you say it with a little bit of authenticity and sincerity, like, I prefer not to comment on that, or even in the form of a question, like, would it be okay if I didn't comment on that yet? It comes off as, the Germans have a saying, the tone makes the music, and that's true in a lot of these cases. Alrighty, let's recap. 5 tips for delaying, deflecting, and being a little bit more assertive in your business communication. Number 1, ask for clarification. Number 2, reassure the questioner. Questioner, is that even a word? Questioner, it sounds odd. Number 3, give yourself some time to think. Number 4, answer with a question. And number 5, avoid answering completely. I hope you enjoyed that. I see you next time. Thank you.